All right, Myanmar protesters clash with security forces in Mandalay on Saturday after the group gathers to show support to the National Unity Government. Political leaders, including ousted members of parliament, announced the formation of a National Unity Government on Friday, including Suu Kyi and leaders of the anti-coup protests and ethnic minorities. Myanmar has been in upheaval since Min Aung Hlaing ousted an elected government led by democracy champion Aung San Suu Kyi, with security forces killing 728 people. Mabrur Ahmed, the founder and director of Restless Beings, a UK-based human rights group, joins us now via Zoom for more on that story. Mr. Ahmed, a very good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
Thank you. Good evening to you as well.
How would you describe the situation in Myanmar as we speak?
Well, I think, there is some degree of excitement, some degree of hope for the future going ahead now with this announcement of this National Unity Government. But there is obviously some trepidation as well. We haven't exactly been in this position before, but we have been in a position where Myanmar and Myanmar people have had something to look forward to and something to hope towards, and have been let down in the past. But this does feel distinctly different to past iterations of kind of revolution, if you like, or calls for change within Myanmar society.
So who are the people forming the unity government?
I mean, to be honest with you, there's a large part of this National Unity Government which were the democratically elected representatives back in November 2020. And of course, from the moment that the Tatmadaw, the Burmese military, decided that they wanted to kind of sweep to power from the 1st of February onwards, there has been a resistance movement known as CDM, or the Civil Disobedience Movement, and they have given support in kind and in numbers to the CPRH, which was, if you like, some sort of interim representation of some of the democratically elected members of parliament who would have taken seat had the military not led this coup. So the National Unity Government is essentially a progression on from this CPRH, which was like an interim government. And the idea behind this National Unity Government now is to put together essentially members of parliament democratically elected, but also carefully selected to represent a cross-section of ethnicities that will essentially rival the Myanmar army, the Tatmadaw, for legitimacy of the country's administration, control, power and governance.
And how is the military responding to this announcement?
Largely unaffected, to be honest with you. I mean, it hasn't really responded in a very obvious way. It hasn't led any obvious statements as such. But I would imagine, according to, if we look back at the history books and look back at the form that the Burmese military has, they largely tend to ignore any calls for revolution or any new calls for unity, and tend to go about their business in their brutal, violent fashion as per usual. And we've seen that kind of continue in the last few days, especially with the onset of the Burmese New Year as well, not affecting or not slowing down any of the brutal comeback for the protesters across Myanmar that the military are employing constantly and continuously.
Now, give us a sense of what the people on the ground are feeling as we speak.
So I think this announcement, has been timed. Like I said to you just a few moments ago, it is this week has seen the new year, or if you like, of the Burmese calendar. And it was timed to fall or coincide with this as well. That the National Unity Government was announced as a timely reminder, almost as a celebration, I suppose, for the country. And there has been a celebratory feel, and there has been a feel definitely of hope and of looking forward to something. But like I said, there is a degree of uncertainty because just because this has been announced by members of public who are seeking to members of parliament who are democratically elected, seeking to legitimately take their place, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen. Again, I'll come back to Burma has been here before, Myanmar has been here before, where rightfully elected people have been, rejected from taking their seats, have been, restricted from taking their legitimate positions by a military that's hell-bent on causing destruction and violence and dismay in order to hold on to its power and to its legitimacy. So I don't see that changing anytime soon. As a result, what I think it does do, and this is what the people of Myanmar are, I suppose, the most hopeful for, is that this now does give a focal point for international diplomacy. And it's really important, I think, and I think this is the next step required as far as Myanmar's transition away from this military coup, is for international governments and community to recognize rightfully the National Unity Government as the legitimate power source in Myanmar, and no longer the Burmese.
Now, Myanmar's post-coup civilian death toll is now climbed past 700. Can it get any worse?
Yes, absolutely. It is getting worse. There hasn't been a massive slowdown in the death numbers. Even over this last few days, we've heard of young children being killed by the military commanders and military soldiers. This isn't going to stop anytime soon, so long as the country is in a state of protest, so long as the CDM, the Civil Disobedience Movement, continues, so long as the National Unity Government gains more and more traction and more public support, the more and more this will annoy the military, and the more the military will continue to try and wrestle back this administration of this country, and they will use more and more violent tactics. And I think we've seen that over the last, since February the 1st, when this coup took place. We're now almost, past the midpoint of April. We've been in this for almost 10, 11 weeks so far, and there hasn't been any let-up in terms of the violence. In fact, as I mentioned, we've only just seen an increase in this violence.
Now, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, has warned Myanmar is heading towards a full-blown conflict with clear echoes of Syria in 2011. Is this an accurate observation?
Look, I don't know how useful it is sometimes to make comparisons in these ways. The two countries have different histories, different contexts, and different internal issues that they're facing. What I think, some of the comparisons that we can draw is that there is a power. In the case of Syria, Bashar al-Assad, and in the case of Myanmar, Min Aung Hlaing and the military, who are holding on to power against the will of the people. And they will hold on to power, and Bashar al-Assad, as we've seen, has held on to power using violence, using deadly force. And the Myanmar military is doing exactly the same thing. Whether or not it turns into the same as Syria, where there are foreign actors coming in and they're fighting other proxy battles, I'm not sure if that's going to happen in Myanmar. But what I can say is that there is definitely seemingly a desire to hold the military to account if this civil disobedience movement it doesn't come to fruition. But so far as the people of Myanmar are concerned, they are not ready and willing to take up arms just yet. Even though so many people have died, they're still believing in this civil disobedience movement. They have confidence in the National Unity Government, and more so, I think, and I think this is really, really hopeful, is that there is some degree of hope in the international community that through international diplomacy, through the recognition of the National Unity Government and other practices, that the Myanmar military will lose its legitimacy, it will lose its financing, and it will lose its ability to retain power in Myanmar. Now, whether that's going to happen or not, again, as an activist, I speak as an activist first and foremost, I remain to be convinced of that. But there is definitely hope, and if there's hope, then we should work on that hope.
You have some experts saying that the Myanmar coup highlights the rise of autocracy in Southeast Asia. Your thoughts?
I totally 100% agree. I think Southeast Asia has been set up since colonialism to allow movements and moments of autocracy to flourish. And I think there's a long way before full democracy is really not just welcomed, but also allowed to flourish in Southeast Asia. Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia to a degree, all have, Vietnam to a degree, all share some form of military coup or military power in the past. And we've seen many of the genocides in the world, whether that's we're talking in Cambodia, Indonesia, or actually, in fact, in Myanmar, have originated from this part, the Southeast Asia, and I think autocracy and the ability and the conditions for autocracy to have prominence in Southeast Asia need to be challenged. They need to be challenged internally. What I mean by internally is I think that ASEAN group of nations need to come together and really take a serious look at how they plan to implement diplomacy and peacekeeping in the region, because up until now it hasn't really worked. It's been very much a hands-off approach where neighboring countries don't get involved in one another's affairs. And while I understand that, it has led to mass violence and it's led to mass destruction of communities. So that's internally, I think Southeast Asia needs to look at itself so far as the ASEAN group of nations is concerned. And I think externally as well, for the large part, a lot of technology, a lot of industrial manpower is formed from in Southeast Asia. And I think the international community perhaps needs to take a look at how it conducts its business and trade with members of or partners in power who are leading autocratic movements which are against the will of people and normally to the detriment of the general public and oftentimes violent and deadly conflict as well. I think that the two internal and external issues need to come hand in hand together before we can think of Southeast Asia moving away from this autocracy that it's become used to.
Okay. Now, Myanmar's military is waging war on its citizens, no doubt about that. And some say it's time to fight back. So how likely is it that Myanmar may plunge into a civil war?
To be honest with you, I think that there is a good degree of likelihood of that happening. We've already seen it in current state, where some, the military, the Myanmar military, has attacked the region, and the ethnic forces have come together to fight back against the Myanmar military in that region. Now, it's just a matter of time for these isolated or these geographical incidents married together into a national movement against the military. I think if that was to happen, I don't think the Myanmar military will necessarily have the ability to hold back if they were fighting or if they were facing multiple ethnic armies across different fronts. The other question is, however, while the Myanmar military is well funded by the likes of the Israeli government, the Chinese government, and many other partners in the region, any ethnic armies do not have this level of funding and this level of state backing. And I think that's where the issue might come of any type of victory. Now, again, a human rights activist at heart, do we want to see any conflict? Do we want to see civil war? Absolutely not. We'd much prefer that there be a diplomatic solution. And I think, this national unity government really is the last hope of a diplomatic solution. But it's something that I think we should remain hopeful over. And before we start talking about civil war and the options of that, I think the national unity government and especially the international community need to welcome and see this as a legitimate partner. And if they do so, and if there is sufficient trade and arms embargoes against the existing Myanmar military, then I think civil war can definitely be avoided, and it should 100% be avoided at all costs if and wherever possible.
And just picking up on that, I mean, the unity government leaders say that they intend to form a federal army and are planning to rope in some of the, the ethnic minority forces. Will this perhaps not lead to an ideological clash between the unity government leaders and the coup leaders, the military, in this particular instance?
Look, if the national unity government is actually going to be a government, then it should obviously have a defense force. And so alongside that, there would be some sort of federal army. Of course, that makes absolute sense. What the national unity government has said is not necessarily that we're going to build up an army made up of many different ethnicities. What they've said is that we're going to build up a national unity government made up of all ethnicities. So I think, we should try and support and back that national unity government's call for unity and reconciliation as a government. And as part of the government, as one of the functions of the government, there will obviously have to be some sort of federal army and a defense system. Now, yes, of course, that's going to lead to a clash, an ideological, ideological clash of minds with the existing Myanmar military and the holders of power at the moment. But I suppose that's what's needed. Whether that turns out to be a war, that is what I'm saying I think can be avoided, so long as the international community and international partners, governments, are able to recognize the National Unity Government as the legitimate power source and therefore impose trade and arms embargo on the existing Myanmar military who are, unfortunately, right now holding that source of power.